about to start my class. Everyone needs 2 year experience. Now, if you walk into facilities with your certification, I'm sure you will have, if you walk in a hospital to volunteer, you will have managers taking consideration because you are already certified. You don't have to have 2 year certification in order to 2 year experience to work. That means that nobody who come out of school will be able to work. You can go ahead and try, you can start applying for volunteer position first. That will get you through the door. For those just joining, we are sterile processing technicians. We teach this course in person and online, and we are available to everyone nationwide. No matter where you are in the United States, we teach this course online. And you can take it from any city or state in the United States, okay? If it's your first time and if you have questions, let me know in the comment section. Like, share, follow, and I'll answer your questions on here, okay? Let me know in the comment section if you have any questions, comments, or concern on sterile processing. I'll be glad to answer your questions here. All right, guys, we are doing our class online today. And if you want to join, let me know. To sign up for our class, you can click on the link in my bio and RSVP for the class. Let me close this. I need to open from my webpage. If you have any questions on sterile processing, please leave your questions in the comment section. I'll answer your questions for you. We start August 16th. It runs for 8 Saturdays. It's held in person and online. Oh, it seemed like everyone on time today for class. How we doing? Hungry but good. Did anyone read on the chapter? It was really short. Did anyone read on the chapter?
Yes.
Oh, Maria, can you give us a little bit of what you learned on point of use processing?
For chapter 7, it talked a lot about point of use treatment guidelines.
Okay.
About like the chart, the proper ways to transport it from place to place.
Okay.
How it be handled.
Okay, can you tell us about tell about the handling of contaminated instruments? How do you go about handling contaminated instruments from the point of use and making its way to decontamination? What are some of the things you learned, the transport method? And anyone can jump in and help Mariella.
If you're going to be transporting it from one, like for the OR to the area, and the facilities are not close together, you would have to transport it in the carts.
Good. That's what I wanted to hear. You use an enclosed case cart, and if you don't have an enclosed case cart, a covered table with a hard bottom will be your second choice to transport, because the reason why we transport instruments safely is to avoid cross-contamination or contaminating and put other people and putting other employees or patient at risk in the hallway, because there are service hallways that we contaminated or clean surgical instrument back and forth from user department. Now, her example was on the operating room in particular. Most of the time, 90% of our trays come from the operating room. Anyone on here can help out too on what Mary said? Can anyone help out?
We also talked about like designated where they leave the carts ready for them to be picked up. It talked about like why it should be picked up right away instead of like letting it sit for too long.
Okay.
Like, so the instruments being rusted from like those. And I also talked a little bit about the brushes that they use to clean some of the instruments.
Okay. And so now Kelly said that it's always good to pick up instruments in a timely manner if it's scheduled. If it's a scheduled pickup, it's always good to pick up instruments. Why do you think is to pick up instrument trays when it's scheduled, based on what we learned in microbiology about? Why do you think it's important for us to pick up our instrument trays on time?
The biofilm that grows on it.
I wanted you to give somebody else a chance, but it's okay. Okay, so the collection of biofilm, right? And who remembers how often microorganisms reproduce? What time frame? What's the time frame that it takes for microorganisms to reproduce? Anyone? What's the time frame? We already covered this.
30 minutes.
That's correct, Ken. Anyone else? Can you give us something? This is a very short chapter. We're not going to spend 1 hour here today. I just want to know if you read this. Anyone else can give us an idea on what point of use processing is? If you don't have questions, I'm going to start throwing questions at you guys. So Ivy, I see you in the corner over here. How are you? I know if you guys going forward in the course, if you don't answer, I'll call you out to ask you. Ivy, you tell us about point of use processing.
I know the importance of points of use for treatments and transportation. So one is like removal of gross soil, and then the other is prevention of damage, prevention of cross contamination.
Okay.
And prevention, and then also timelines. So with the gross soil, it says it is important because once the instrument is soiled and it's like for a long time it grows microorganisms, and then so it is difficult.
That's enough. I like the fact that you knew all of this and you were keeping quiet in the corner while I was asking questions. So, Christina, how are you today? Christina, I know Christina is in here. All right, let's get started. It's not a long chapter we're gonna cover today, and I'm glad you guys were able to read it. It's a short chapter, and the reason why I wanted you guys to read this because it's an introduction to decontamination for sterile processing and what we're gonna cover. Similar activities and processes and procedures that take place in at the point of use will be something similar to what you would do when it comes to the decontamination setting when you move your instruments from the point of use and transport them to the decontamination. We understand that decontamination is the only place equipped within the medical facility to conduct the cleaning of reusable surgical instruments and equipment. Is there any question before we get started? Anyone?
No.
Okay. On the first slide over here, this is a neutral pH detergent. It's an enzymatic detergent, meaning it has live enzymes in there that breaks down protein, lipids, which is fat from medical instrumentation. You might come across different types of detergent based on your facility water system. It depends. Most of the time, detergents are chosen. We're not even there yet, but I'm just lecturing you on this because this is what I use at work. And I took this picture so I can show you guys. You might come across a Prolistica detergent that's manufactured by Steris. Most of the detergents will have the use information on there and how to go about. All right? Thanks, brother. And how to go about using them. Keep that in mind. It's not the exact thing you might meet in where you might come across. Learning objectives. In this chapter, we will review the four main goals of soy items of preparation and transport. We will identify the source of contaminated instruments. We already know where contaminated instruments come from by this time in the course, correct? We all know where we get contaminated instruments from operating room, labor delivery, cath lab, emergency department, and if there's an attached surgical department or dental clinic to the hospital, we will receive soy instruments from those locations as well. We will explain the point of use preparation procedures that are performed in an operating room or at the point of use before it's been loaded onto case card or hard bottom table to be transported to sterile processing. We'll also review basic procedures to transport soy items from the user area to the central service decontamination area, or sometimes to transport soy instruments from their pickup location to the decontamination area. We discuss safety guidelines for transporting soy items to the sterile processing area, identify basic sources of education and training information applicable to the transport of contaminated items. Instruments processed in the sterile processing department are transported from the customer to the from the user department to decontamination. And like we said earlier in this chapter, decontamination. Please go ahead. I didn't get your question clearly. Could you start from the beginning so everyone can hear you in the class?
Every all the instruments are cleaned with the same solution. There's certain solution for specific instrument.
That's a great question, by the way. We clean instruments based on the manufacturer instruction. Every medical device that you have has a manufacturer recommendation for the detergent that you use to clean the instrument. It has a recommendation for the sterilization method to use or the sterilant use, whether it's a high temperature or low temperature. Like we have different flowers. We have an example. We have in microbiology when we cover plants. You have different plants and they all germinate at different rates. Same thing with microorganisms. Not all disinfectant or sterilant will kill all at the same time. Same as detergent. Not every detergent is used for the same medical device. We pick detergent based on the water that we have and usually the manufacturer instruction. If it was produced by Philips or Boss Instrument, Boss is going to have in the written instruction that we should use maybe a neutral pH detergent or maybe an alkaline detergent in order to clean the instruments properly because that was the detergent that it was tested on during the independent lab study. Remember the 510K study that the FDA required manufacturers to have that we talked about? The pre-market approval that we talked about when we talk about regulatory agencies in the last chapter before? Before the instrument makes it to the market, it has gone through a series of testing and cleaning and sterilization protocols.
Solution to use.
I just told you it will be in a manufacturer instruction from a company that manufactures an instrument. If you are going to watch a Samsung instrument, Samsung will send you an instruction for use on how to clean the instruments and what to clean the instruments with. When you have a recipe at home and they give you the ingredients, do you take water instead of butter to bake? Exactly. Same way you follow that recipe from the organization, and if they tell you use a neutral pH detergent, you have to pick a neutral pH detergent. The same way when you bake in a cake, you're not going to substitute butter for water. You're not going to have a full batter. That's why we follow manufacturer instruction for every single instrument that we have in sterile processing. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Keep that in mind. For sterilization purposes, for decontamination purposes, for high level disinfection purposes, whether it's high level, intermediate level, or low level disinfection of any medical device, the selected chemical of choice is determined by the manufacturer or is predetermined by the facility in which you work based on your water quality. Usually, water detergents are picked based on water quality with reference to the manufacturer instruction. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Where do we go to find what detergent is used for certain instrument?
On the manufacturer information.
Manufacturer instruction. And every manufacturer is required by law through the FDA to provide written instructions on how to clean, on how to assemble, on how to sterilize instruments. In the cleaning portion in your manufacturer instruction, there will be recommended solutions to use for decontamination purposes. Point of use decontamination will also be on there as well. It gives you recommended solutions to use, whether it's going to be your enzymatic detergent, whether it's going to be an alkaline detergent or acid-based detergent. It's found in your manufacturer instruction, okay? Do go looking anywhere else for instruction on how to clean instruments because it should come from the manufacturer. All right? Depending on the facility, the decontamination might be close by or far away from you. If I'm recording, I think it should be. You know what? Let me see here. Record this.
No, it's not.
Oh, thank you so
Recording
much.
in progress.
We just started at the introduction. Thank you so much for pointing that out. Depending on the facility, the sterile processing decontamination might be close by the operating room or it might be far away. But no matter where it's at, the process of transport of instruments stays the same. It's going to be in an enclosed case card or an enclosed table covered by some wrapper to avoid spillage. We will discuss and review recommended protocols and requirements for these transport activities. Any question before we go further?
Yes, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Where would we find the instructions on each instrument? Where would it be found in?
If you work in a smaller facility, they will have instruction for you, the instruction for use in binders. That will say the binder will say manufacturer instruction. If you work in a hospital, there are databases that are paid for by the hospital that are web based. You can put the name of an instrument and it would give you the manufacturer instructions on a computer if it's web based. If your hospital has a manual manufacturer instruction system, they will be in binders. You can go and find that binder, and it good question because those should be available to you just in case you need to debunk something. If someone tells you that you need to use, maybe you need to do a low temperature sterilization instead of a high temperature sterilization, you would like to verify by going to the manufacturer instruction. Because keep in mind, when we get to sterilization, whenever you sterilize instruments, within the manufacturer instruction, they have preferred sterilization method. And then they have secondary sterilization method, but all of them will meet sterilization. All right, you will find that in your facility, whether it's web-based or whether it's manual. The importance of point of use treatment and transport. Technicians should be aware of the goals of point of use treatment and transport. These include the removal of gross soil. That's one of the main reasons to have point of use treatment because right after the surgical procedure is performed, we got tissue, body fat, blood, bone left on the instrument. It is the responsibility of the technician working in the room to wipe down these instruments. Go ahead, Ken.
I'm sorry.
It is the responsibility of the technician in this room to make sure that those instruments are kept moist until they make their way to decontamination. Why is it important to keep the instruments moist before it makes its way to decontamination?
So it doesn't get like all dried up.
That's correct.
It's easy to take off.
And it's easy to clean because when the instrument dries up, not only does it create biofilm on it, depending on how long it stays on the instrument, it also makes it difficult to clean, just like you would do your spaghetti bowl in the kitchen when you're done eating. If you leave it on the kitchen sink without soaking it in the sink, it might dry up and make it harder to scrub later on. Prevention of cross-contamination. Transporting soil items safely is key in preventing cross-contamination, meaning items should be transported in a solid leak-proof container between the point of use and the decontamination area. And this leak-proof container might turn out to be case carts, like it looks like this. You should transport your instrument like you see on here. These are very neat. I promise you, you're not gonna meet it this shiny when you're in decontamination. Items should be transported in enclosed case cart. If you don't have an enclosed case cart, they should be transported on tables with solid bottom and then cover with a plastic covering that prevents aerosol from spreading from the contaminated instrument or spillage to the floor. Because sometimes when you come out, you must still have some solutions on there that were used in the surgical procedures. Okay? Timeliness. Very important to clean instrument on time and to turn them over just in case those trays might be needed for future surgical procedures or maybe a turnover tray for the day. The prompt return of soiled or contaminated items to the SPD department is essential for cleaning and processing because not only is it reprocessed for future cases, it stops the growth of microorganisms on the instrument tray after it's been sitting in there for a while, keeping others safe. The goal, what is our main job in sterile processing, guys? What is the main job? What do we do?
I think we make sure that the tools for surgery are well cleaned, bacteria or virus or anything.
That's correct. And in this process, by cleaning, assembly, sterilization, storage, we are keeping people safe, right? The patients in which these surgical procedures will be performed on will remain safe. They will come out without any surgical site infection or hospital-acquired infection. What did we say about hospital-acquired infection from the last chapter we covered? Anyone can tell me about hospital-acquired infection before we go forward?
There are infections that occur days after surgery in the hospital. I come to the hospital with whatever is happening to you. So if it happened in the hospital, yes.
Okay, so acquired infections would be illnesses you might get while you are at the hospital and not what you came into the hospital for. You might have a sprained ankle and you might leave a MRSA. That will be a hospital-acquired infection. And what about surgical site infection?
Infection you get after surgery, like after your post-op.
Yeah, post-op, but specifically, we know that'll be under the umbrella of hospital-acquired infection, but usually surgical site infection would be infection that occurs on the site of the surgical procedure. All right? Keep that in mind. On the side of the surgical procedure will be your surgical site infection. It does fall under the umbrella of hospital-acquired infection because you got it from the hospital when you had your surgery done. Sources of contaminated items. Where do we get contaminated items from, guys? This is one of the easiest chapters to know. Our biggest source of contaminated instruments.
The operation
room, which is the biggest source. Reusable medical devices such as instruments and equipment are used in numerous locations throughout the healthcare facility, right? We've got labor and delivery cath lab, the operating room, emergency department, ambulatory care that would be associated with the hospital, maybe dental clinics within the hospital. These are all sources of contaminated instruments. And we say, what is the best mode of transportation for contaminated instruments?
Can I ask this question?
Please, go ahead.
Do you get tools from the mall too?
If they're sent, because most of the time they really don't need sterilization because they're performing procedures on cadaver. These instruments are not really sterilized. We do not receive instruments from cadaver labs. No.
Yeah, I think they have different people that deal with those people.
We don't need sterile instrument. If you're in a harvesting lab where you harvest tissue, then you need, and there are locations in Edison that does harvesting of people who gave their body to science and tissue donors. Those would need sterilized instruments to harvest tissue. Contaminated items must be returned to the sterile processing decontamination area during scheduled soil pickup rounds or upon request from the user department. Even if labor delivery has a pickup round that you have to do 3 times a day, but on this day they decided that they had too many babies and they call you downstairs to go and pick it up, or if you're upstairs, you have to go and make your rounds. Any question? Holding item until they return to SPD. Departments that store reusable instruments after a procedure for later transport should have a designated holding area, which will be a small room which is decontaminated. Decontamination is like a room that will hold contaminated instrument, and it should be labeled with a biohazard sign on the door. If you look in your book on figure 7.3, the door should be labeled with a big red or orange biohazard sign that indicates that everything in that room is contaminated. Point of use treatment. Instrument decontamination begins at the point of use. What does this say again? Instrument decontamination begins at the point of use. Upon completion of a surgical... Yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were...
Yeah, I was asking, but nobody answered, so I kept going.
I think point of use is when it's... After it's sterilized and then the operation room opens it, it's point of use. Whether they use it or they do not, it needs to be sterilized again. That's what we call point of use, right?
Point of use is wherever the device or the instrument is used is the point of use. If you have a surgical procedure performed on a parking lot, that's the point of use. But like your wherever the instrument is used or open up, it's considered your point of use. Whether it's in the operating room, whether it's in labor and delivery, once the instrument is exposed to that field, it's considered unsterile. Okay. Upon of a surgical procedure, instrument must be prepared in a manner that will help ensure they can be safely transported to SPD for complete cleaning. Sterile processing, Melus, can you mute your microphone? Sterile processing professionals must enlist the help of the operating room to help to ensure that instruments and equipment are correctly prepared immediately after the surgical procedure. Meaning that once the surgical procedure is performed, Melus, can you mute your microphone? I muted you before, please. Thank you. In order to receive your instruments safely damaged, you need to go and sometimes help the OR to make sure that the instruments they're sending you are not crowded upon one another. You don't have lighter instruments on the bottom of heavier instruments. Any questions so far? Okay, somebody's by the phone over here. Any question? Any questions so far? Okay, until. All right, good. Reasons for point of use treatment. What are some of the reasons that we have point of use treatment? There are several important reasons that the preparation process begins in the user department at the point of use. The point of use preparation helps prolong the life of instrument by not allowing the instruments to dry or rust. This kid is on his mom's computer. All right, this is no bueno. Sorry guys. Can somebody text her to let her son get off this thing? All right. Point of use preparation. And guys, if you in class, if you have to leave class, you can take your tablet with you and mute it so the kids don't come in. This kid is okay. Let's just pause this and call her real quick, okay? Because I don't like that interference. Okay, I think should be good here. Any question before we go forward? Any question? Anyone?
No, it's okay. Please keep going.
Okay. The point of use preparation helps prolong the life of instruments. Substances like blood, saline can break down devices or the device protective finish. When instruments are made, there's a chromium oxide layer that protects the instrument for the entire duration of the instrument life, and that prevents rust or staining from damaging the instrument. That chromium oxide layer is sometimes taken away by saline, if it's soaked in saline or betadine or buffer iodine. So those will damage instruments. There are certain instruments that...
Is it possible, like, just...
I'm out of class.
Sorry, I'm so...
No, it's okay, because it's causing disturbing everyone. Dry soil debris, especially within instruments with lumens. Dry soil debris, if you have instruments with lumens, right, if you have to brush through them, they're the ones that are most likely to clot if they're not treated on time. And you have to treat them at the point of use by flushing them with sterile water so it doesn't hold blood. Soil in excess moisture promotes formation of biofilm. What is biofilm? It's a collection of microorganisms that attach to the surface of instruments or sinks, attach to each other to form a colony. In this process, it makes it even exceedingly difficult to clean after it sits on there for a while. That's why the timeliness for cleaning instruments at the point of use is very important. The colony protects itself by forming a protective gel and exceedingly difficult to penetrate with detergent and or disinfectant. It's not just only hard to clean. Even if you try to disinfect it, it's harder to actually kill those microorganisms under that protective gel because it's like an entire colony. The point of use cleaning does not replace the cleaning process in the central surface decontamination area. When instruments are clean in the operating room, guys, when it comes to decontamination area, to sterile processing decontamination area, you still have to clean those instruments. Is that clear? That is not, the process starts at the point of use and it should be completed in decontamination area. When soil dries, instruments require a more aggressive cleaning method and may also take longer to clean or longer to get rid of the biofilm that you don't really see with your naked eye. This can increase processing time. Just in case you need to turn over that tray, it might delay you in the cleaning process. So that means it requires a longer soaking time. It requires longer scrubbing. And it requires maybe multiple times submerged into the ultrasonic to get bone fragment from caissons and other instruments that might chip away at bone. The proper care and handling of surgical equipment and instruments is the responsibility of everyone who comes in contact with and who has been trained to handle surgical instruments after it has been used in the user department, meaning the person transporting the instrument to the sterile processing department should have training. Not anyone can transport instrument, guys. Not anyone can be left with the authority to handle surgical instruments. Technicians responsible for handling instruments at the point of use must keep in mind that these are delicate, expensive instruments that might be damaged if they are placed wrongly into the set that it came in. The way in which we place our instrument back into the trays when they're done is by going with heavier instruments on the very bottom and then lighter instruments on the top. That's how we send our instrument back. If you notice that the instrument is coming from the user department and the opposite is said, meaning you have the lighter instruments and then the retractors on top, you should make this known to the user department, whether it's delivery or operating room, that instruments have been transported in the wrong manner and that might cause damage to instrument. If you notice that there are sharp instruments exposed, because we don't sharp instrument in special ways, all pointing in one direction. Okay? And so far about point of use processing and transport so far. Any question? Does this make sense? And before we go further, did anyone get an email back from Employee Health? Charity, did you send the email to the address I sent you today or yesterday?
Yes, I did.
You didn't get a response?
No.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Anyone besides Charity, who else emailed Employee Health on here? Nobody in class besides Charity that emailed Employee Health? So you're the only one plus the other guy. I don't think he's in class today.
I did.
Oh, any of you did? Okay. So 2 of you. Alright, point of use treatment guidelines. All individuals performing point of use treatment should receive education, training, and have competencies completed for the task performed, meaning you should be certified, you should know how to end the instrumentation, and you should be being monitored by a preceptor to see how well you do in the point of use treatment. While wearing your personal protective equipment, you are not going to receive decontaminated or contaminated instruments or transporting them without wearing personal protective equipment to put them on the transport cart. Before you touch those medical devices or contaminated instruments, you have to have your PPE on. You have to remove the gross soil. Follow instructions for use cleaning of flexible scopes if that's what you're picking up. Manufacturers typically suggest that water and enzymatic solution be suctioned throughout the scope suction channel at the end of the procedure to flush the channels and keep them moist before they get to you. Meaning, for people who go for GI procedures, after the procedure is done, the technician on the floor has to flush the working channel to make sure it stays moist until it gets to you. Alright? They also state that the shaft should be wiped down to remove gross soil. If that scope went into the person's mouth or anus, it should be wiped down before sent to decontamination for proper cleaning. You cannot send the entire instrument dirty. Why? Because bacteria will grow on them as you transport them. You have to separate sharps into separate containers. Remember I told you that when you separate sharps, the sharps are pointing in one direction. Place reusable sharp instrument with sharp edges such as needles, drill bits, in separate containers to keep your colleagues safe when they get those instruments. Most of the tasks we're describing here are performed by operating room technicians and nurses. If you come across instruments that are loaded into the trays in the wrong way, it's your responsibility to make this known to the operating room or the user department that we're sending sharp instrument mixed with regular instrument and it might cause harm to us who are cleaning them or taking them out of the container. Is that clear? People make mistakes sometimes, but you have to make sure that you let them know. Place reusable sharp instruments with sharp edges such as needles and drill bits in separate containers. You have to separate reusable items from disposable items. Reusable linen should be removed and placed into an appropriate bag or container. The user should take extra caution to ensure that small instruments are not stuck on linen, because usually that's how we lose instruments. Towel clamps or prior will be stuck on linens and it will be thrown into the garbage. You have to remove disposable components and discard them into the appropriate biohazard bin if you have one. You have to open hinge instrument and disassemble multi-part instrument. There are some instruments that have 2 or 3 parts attached to them. You have to know that you have to open them up before decontamination, and then you have to reassemble them in prep and packaging for testing purposes, and then disassemble them before they go into the sterilization. Disassemble multi-part instrument and place instruments in the appropriate instrument tray in an orderly manner, meaning heavier instruments on the bottom and lighter instruments on the top. That's the only order of soaking or transporting instrument to put back into the container. You don't put light instruments on the bottom and put the heavy ones on top. You might end up breaking or damaging those instruments. Figure 7.5 provides an example of instruments that have not been properly prepared for transportation. If you look in your books right now. Place heavy instruments on the bottom. Okay, I'll do that already. Keep items together by sets or container. If you get a retractor set, do not put it into the instrument tray. The retractor set should go back into the instrument tray. Keep instrument moist to prevent soil from drying Figure 7.6 shows you dry blood on instrument that wasn't wiped down or wasn't sprayed with an enzymatic spray before it was transported to the decontamination area. Do not use saline to keep instrument moist, even though it's the most prevalent solution for surgery because it is used to suction the surgical site for the surgeon to see properly. Do not use saline to moisten instrument because they might speed up corrosion for the instrument. They might also cause pitting if the instrument if it stays on the instrument for a long time. You have to empty fluid from reusable containers, follow facility protocol and instruction for use and how to empty fluids. There will be some canisters in the operating room that might be filled with saline mixed with blood. You should have the proper protective equipment on in order to dispose of all of these things. If reusable instruments were used on a
What is corrosion?
corrosion, corrosion is the eating away of metal by some chemical reaction. If you put acid on something, it causes it to corrode. So that's corrosion.
So it rusts.
Not just rust. Like if you put it into any other solution that might cause it to stain, it might stain and you'll be unable to clean it. Rusting might be the final stage because when we come to the instrument manufacturing process, you will understand that stainless steel are not really stainless. They are stain resistant metals. They actually do stain and they do rust. But because they have this protective chromium oxide layer that are done for after the passivation process of the instrument that causes the chromium oxide outside of the instrument, it lasts the lifetime of the instrument and protects the instrument against rust and pitting. And what will cause these things will be buffer iodine and solutions that are not allowed to be used on medical devices for cleaning or wiping them down. The only recommended solutions to clean instrument will be enzymatic spray or sterile water at the point of use before it's been transported to the to the user department decontamination. Any question? Is that clear? Any questions, comments, concern? Anyone? Is this process clear? Point of use processing and the reasons why we do point of use processing. Is it clear?
Yes.
This is going to be similar when we start discussing decontamination. We are getting into the nitty gritty of sterile processing now. Where does decontamination of surgical instruments start?
Point of view?
At the point of use. Does point of use qualify as decontamination of surgical instruments?
Yes. Yes.
Just told you that point of use processing is not the total decontamination. Decontamination starts at the point of use. They are preparing it to be transported, and the preparation process includes moistening the instrument before it makes it to you. The removal of gross soil from the instrument, which is visible, like the blood, the tissue, the bone, to get them off the instrument. That's what point of use processing is for. Take away the bone fragment, the fat, the tissue, the blood, the residual items on the tray, if the dry blood is on there, to be sprayed down in order to make it much easier when you receive these items in decontamination to clean them properly. Because if we didn't use point of use treatment, we will always receive dry instrument with a lot of tissue on it. That includes fat, blood, or just muscle tissues. All right? What did we learn about CJD in microbiology? Does anyone remember what the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is and what causes it? We talk about bacteria, we talk about protozoa, we talk about viruses, and then we talk about prions. Anyone remember what we talked about, prions?
Yes.
Is it the one that is caused by prom?
The Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is a prion ailment that has a longer incubation time of up to 30 years, and we said that there is no known sterilization method to get rid of CJD, and we said that is a neurodegenerative disease that once it surfaces is highly lethal and probably has no cure. All right, and we said that if a patient is suspected of having CJD, what do? We notify management, and then we dispose of those instruments or follow the recommended practice on how to get rid of CJD instruments. All right. If you're working in the operating room, you have to notify the sterile processing department for turnover trays. What are turnover trays? Turnover trays will be trays that will be needed for future surgeries. For example, we have a podiatrist set at your facility, but because you have only 5 podiatrists set and there were 7 cases scheduled, what do? You turn the very first 3 trays over to get it ready for the last couple of cases. We call that in sterile processing turnover trays. And usually you'll be informed by the operating room because they know they have 7 cases scheduled, but 5 podiatry. When you turn over trays in sterile processing, you just don't turn the exact amount you need. Because the example I just gave was 5 podiatry and 7 cases, right? Instead of turning over just 2 to equate it to, you always have to do an extra tray because anything can go wrong with just 1 tray. All right. You have to notify the sterile processing department for repairs or broken instruments that will be tagged in the operating room before they are brought to sterile processing. Any questions so far on point of use processing?
Yeah, can you repeat that turnover part again, please? I got a little confused right there.
When a tray is referred to as a turnover tray, it means that tray is needed for a case for the same day, and we have limited quantity on hand. That's why we need to turn the tray over for future cases. An example I gave was, for example, we have 5 podiatry trays in our facility, right? We just have 5 sets. And on that day, a doctor decided to schedule 7 cases, and 1 set will only cover 1 case. How many more trays do we need for those 7 cases?
6.
We have 5 podiatry sets. We have 7 cases. 1 set per case. How many cases can a 5 podiatry cover? 5 cases. How many more sets do we need for this total of 7 cases for that day? Let me do this again.
2.
You have 5 sets.
You
of
need
trays.
to do an extra one.
Oh,
They have it.
I thought
Okay.
you said how much would they need 5 podiatrists? Sorry, I didn't get the question well.
The question again is this. If you have 5 sets of podiatry instruments, and then if those doctor decided to schedule 7 cases that day, you only need 1 tray per case, and we only have 5. How many more trays do you need to complete all 7 cases for that day? Those 2 trays will be considered turnover trays. And what happens is that when you process the first 2 cases for that day or the first 3 cases for that day, we have to inform the package department that we need those trays that were used earlier in the day for a turnover for the last 2 cases for the day. That's what you call a turnover tray.
They're kind of like backup trays in case
of anything. And because we need 2 trays for the last 2 procedures, we are not only going to process 2 trays, we're going to process 3. Just in case maybe something dropped from one of those trays and we still have another tray to back it up. In sterile processing, you never always have the exact amount of instruments needed for procedure. You always have to have a backup. All right? If you were a supervisor in a facility and they came and told you that, oh, we got 7 cases, but we got 5, and the first 2 cases are done, and you only process 2 trays as turnover, you might be screwed if something goes wrong with the other tray, and then the other tray is still sitting in decontamination. You always process 1 more tray than what you have scheduled for that day as a backup.
Can you do like 2, 3 more just in case?
If you do 2 or 3, it's even better because then you don't have to do that tray over. You can put it down. You can store it if they're not used. Always process more trays than needed for a procedure because you never know what might happen, especially when it comes to turnover trays. Now you guys understand when you go to a hospital and they tell you that we need shoulder set to be turned over, right? Now you get it?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, before we go on. Yes, when it goes to the ER, what do we say over here? So let's go back to this slide so you get a better understanding. We're talking about what? The point of use treatment guidelines, right? And under the guidelines, it says that when you bring the instrument, where are we getting all of these instrument trays from? What are we talking about? Where are we speaking of right now? The point of use. Who was asking the question? Who?
John.
John, it's point of use. Do you know what the point of use is? Or where is it? No, I'm asking John. Let's give John the floor. John, where is the point of use?
The point of view is the instrument that we trying to decontaminate.
So, John, what is considered the point of use? I want to get that part clear so we'll understand and we can go far and break it down for you. What is considered the point of use in a hospital? Or where? So, John, let me clarify this for you. The point of use is where a surgical procedure is performed in a hospital. That's where we send our instrument trays to be used by doctors to operate on the patients. Once that surgery is done, everything in that room that was exposed to the surgical field is considered contaminated. Now what we're talking about is how we transport those instruments that were used. For example, our point of use we're going to discuss for example purposes would be the operating room. Everything that was used in the operating room is now considered contaminated. We're talking about how to safely transport those instruments after they've been treated to bring them to decontamination. We talk about how we need to remove gross soil, right? in the slides before this. We've passed those parts where you remove the gross soil. If you are doing endoscope, how you spray down the endoscope so it's not dry before it comes to the decontamination area. Decontamination is the only location in a hospital that is equipped to process dirty instruments. I'm going to stop using soil and say dirty instruments. That's the only location. Once the technician brings the instrument down to decontamination, and that technician knows that the tray that he's dropping off needs to be turned over, it's his responsibility to inform the department, the technician in decontamination, that this podiatry tray I'm dropping off is needed for the 5th case for today. Can you please prioritize this tray? That's why it says notify sterile processing for turnovers. And now I'm breaking down what turnover is. I just give you the example of what a turnover tray is. Now you guys understand what a turnover tray. Does this make sense to you? Do you understand? We all understand that whatever is opened up in the surgical suite and exposed to a patient during the surgical procedure is contaminated. At the same time, after we've done our point of use cleaning of gross soil from the tray, once we bring it down to decontamination, if that tray has to be turned over, now that we understand what turnover instruments are, we inform sterile processing or whoever is in there. Mr. Y, Mr. Z, this tray should be turned over for Dr. X for case number 5 at 2 o'clock. And then we will prioritize that. If we were working on a tray that wasn't a priority to be turned over, we will leave that tray to the side and prioritize our turnover items for that day. Usually, they don't really have to inform you. At the beginning of the shift, you have a list of trays posted on the wall in decontamination that indicates what needed to be turned over, or some modern facility will have screens. And once you're using an electronic system, once you scan that tray, it pops up with an alert, turnover tray for you. It makes it easier to keep the workflow going and how we prioritize our instruments in decontamination area. The same technician bringing this dirty tray down to decontamination will also inform you about broken instruments. And when they inform you of broken instrument, if it's not tagged, you need to tag them to inform the other side to replace those instruments once they're in prep and packaging. Does this make sense to everyone? Any question? All clear? The transport of soil instruments. Contaminated items should be contained before transport to avoid or minimize airborne or contact spread of microorganisms, meaning you could hit a wall, spill the instrument. That's why they have to be transported in a leak-proof container or system like this case card that I showed you before. All right? The best mode of transport will be an enclosed case card that I show you here on figure 7.8. The one I have on my slide here is a little bit fancy. You might come across it or you might not come across it. Not everything in your book is going to be as spec and new as the facility you work in. Don't be carried away, okay? These closed case cards prevent drips and spills. Smaller items may be transported properly in labeled plastic bins. If an open transport cart is used, the open transport cart should have a solid bottom as well. You cannot have a perforated bottom to transport soil instruments from decontamination to the user department from the user department of decontamination. Metal tray containers should be placed on top of fragile plastic instruments. What was the order of putting instrument into tray that I talked about?
The heavy ones first, and then the lighter ones on top.
There you go. Same thing you do for trays. You put your heavier trays towards the bottom and put your lighter trays on top. That's the same rationale. Patient care equipment should be transported in special carts. The goal of all soil transport is to minimize the risk of cross-contamination either by spillage, airborne, or just accidents on someone hitting them hitting someone in the hallway. Scheduled pickup from other departments should be done in a timely manner to avoid the shortage of instruments and supplies. If you pick up labor and delivery trays on time, you will send it back to them on time. Baby don't have a special time. They might be scheduled to be born on the 25th and they'll decide to come today. That's why labor and delivery is very important, to have the scheduled pickup on time to sterilize the instrument and send it back to them on time. Usually in hospital setting, we use the same case card for transport of clean instruments, clean or sterile instrument, and then dirty instruments. This case card that we see on here will be used vice versa. This case cards will be used to transport all of the sterile instruments that we need for surgery for the next day. After the procedure is done, the technicians will put the dirty instruments back in that same case card. We will reuse the case card for future clean transport. Before we do that, we have to clean down the case card, make sure it's properly dried up without any moisture before we load up our clean or sterile items on the case card. All right? Okay. And how do we go about cleaning the case card? We follow manufacturer instructions for cleaning case card. You might go to some facilities that do not have cart washers. You have to manually clean them by following the instructions for use. If you know what type of detergent that was recommended for those case cards, that's what you would use for those case cards to clean them. Do not go about doing it your own way. Every item that has to be cleaned comes with a manufacturer instruction. If you are trained by someone who you think might be misleading you, like Kelly was asking, find a book for manufacturer instructions and read on it yourself, or go to a senior manager to explain to you in details how to clean that case card if you don't have a cart washer. If you do have a cart washer, you should be trained how to use the cart washer and how to load the cart washer with the case cards. Does that make sense? Is it clear? Question to you guys. What is the best mode of transport of dirty instruments from user department to decontamination? Case card.
Yes.
And if you don't have an enclosed case card, what is the next second choice?
The tray table with
A solid.
bottom.
And why do we prefer enclosed case card to other tables? Why do we choose enclosed case cards in this sense?
So all the germs is locked up in the case code.
To avoid cross-contamination. That should just be your short answer, okay? But it makes sense. Safety guidelines for soil transport. All instruments, especially utensils used in patient care, are considered what? Contaminated. Just like John was talking about. Wear your personal protective equipment when you pick up instruments in the OR. And once you're done loading your case card, you need to take off your PPE, dispose of it in the operating room, wash your hands, and then you have to move your case card with a glove on in the hallway. That's why before you take out the case card from loading it, you have to wipe down the handles of the case card with an antibacterial wipe. You do not walk down the hallway wearing gloves, moving a case card. Why? Because you're taking the contaminants from your hand and walking down the hallway. Remove PPE and wash your hands before transporting card out of the store location. Transporting cars throughout the corridor poses significant risk. That's why you need to be careful when you come to intersections. Before you turn, make sure that sometimes there will be big mirrors up on the ceiling. Take a look at those mirrors. Make sure there is nobody coming before they bump into you, because you're carrying a biohazard waste already. All right. There's a danger of splashes, spills, or aerosol exposures. Technicians should wear the appropriate PPE required by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. Technicians should clean and decontaminate the soil items using the soil items as OSHA regulation for PPE. When you clean items, make sure you are trained to clean the items that you're cleaning. Do you take your own detergent to work when you go to clean medical instruments from home?
No.
What do you use when you get into decontamination?
The proper PPE.
The recommended detergent by the manufacturer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay. Off-site processing. Just as we have Amazon shipping, sterile processing, we have outside processing as well. There are organizations that are out there, just like they have a full warehouse, fully operational, a centralized operation for sterile processing. Just in case one day your facility got flooded or the boiler broke down, you can call these facilities. They will bring their cars, which are Department of Transport certified, to transport soil items to their location. They will sterilize it and then bring it back to you in a car that is again certified and by the Department of Transport to bring you insurance. Surgery doesn't stop. Disaster doesn't end surgery from happening unless it's elective. Okay? There are people out there. Sterile processing locations are offsite. I have worked in one of them, but I have people who work in offsite location where they ship instruments from hospital, bring it there, clean it, set it up, and send it back to the hospitals. Any question? Education and training. Carefully thought out guidelines, procedures must be developed to ensure proper handling of soil instruments, equipment. And the development of these procedures should be done with the input and support of the facility infection prevention and hazardous materials committees. That will include sterile processing technician, some nurses and doctors from the operating room that will work in these interdisciplinary team or interdepartmental teams to make sure that we have our instruments safely transported from the user department to the decontamination department and have a free flow of communication as to whether we have damaged instruments, whether we have instruments to be turned over. Because if we don't have this information, we cannot service the user department properly. Recommended practices for contaminated items transport are provided by the Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation, which is AMI. AMI is our Bible for central service, all right? We have most of our recommendations from AMI. Anyone who may handle contaminated item must be educated about the dangers associated with biohazardous items. We should know that We need to take standard precaution in handling instruments, even if they look as brand new. Once they were exposed to that user department room, it is considered contaminated, even if it looks shiny without you seeing a speck of blood on it. You need to wear your PPE before you handle them. Environmental services, courier services employees are example of staff who come in contact with hazardous equipment. To conclude, instrument preparation at the point of use and proper transport to central service requires interdepartmental teamwork. The technicians in the room, the OR nurses in the room who will help count the instruments and put them back in the trays. Good communication and training can help personnel in all departments to protect their facility instruments and personnel, not just the instrument and the personnel transporting these instruments back and forth, and better serve patients. By following the four main goals of point of use preparation, we can keep instruments and co-workers safe by implementing these guidelines accordingly. You know how to remove gross soil from the instruments after use. You know how to prevent damage by loading the instrument properly, meaning you put the heavier instruments on the bottom and the lighter instruments on top. You make sure you put the heavier instruments on the bottom and the lighter instrument trays on top. Prevention of cross-contamination by using enclosed case cart system or any cart or table that has a solid bottom. We have to keep others safe by properly transporting these instruments. Usually what I didn't mention here, when you transport dirty instruments, the best advice is to pull the instrument cart behind you. That way you are facing the air pressure and then that contaminated air is behind you. All right, that ends our chapter for today. You guys see how short this was? Less than 1 hour. Is this how you want your class every Saturday? No. All right, that's it. Any question for me before we get out of here? I know you guys want to get ready for work tomorrow. Any questions for me on this chapter or the past chapters we did on Saturday?
Yeah, for the tissue to push instead of pull. So when we should pull the contaminated tray, would that be allowed in the...
Yes. You remember when we talk about taking case cards to the operating room, and one of the dangers in that is that sometimes you might come to an intersection that you don't see properly. Usually when you push a bigger case card, you don't really see around the corners. The advantage of pulling the cards is that you get to see around the corners when you're pulling it. And the advantage also is that when you're pulling a contaminated card and there's a spill behind you, it leaves the air current behind you and not in front of you when you're pushing it. All right? Okay. Pull the card behind you. All right. So thank you there, Devin. If you done, so we can call it a day today, or you guys have questions for me, I can jump into the next chapter if you guys want.
I accidentally kept doing that. I kept going into chapter 8 by accident.
No, because chapter 7 is very short. That's why I told you guys to do on Wednesday, because it wasn't really going to be long. Chapter short. Chapter 8 on the decontamination process, where we're going to talk about the cleaning, the washer, disinfector, and the equipment used in there. Please go home tonight or this week. Read on chapters 8 and 9. Okay? Vida, I know you're in London. It's like midnight there already. I'm glad that you made it to class.
I wanted to ask you, you said about aerosols. Yeah, you think transportation of soil items. You did mention of cross-contamination. You said something about aerosols, but I didn't really copy the aerosol.
Aerosol, remember when we talk about tuberculosis? What if we deal with patients from different walks of life and different medical diagnoses, but it's not our job to question them. Our job is to transport instrument properly and safely so we don't cause cross-contamination. Contamination should be caused, from the wind, the air current hitting the instruments and going up into the air. What is the life of the tuberculosis on any metal? How long does it last on there?
7 years.
7 years.
If, for example, you did not know this because your job is, precaution to assume everything is dirty. If you go to pull a card from the operating room and you leave it open, and unfortunately the patient who the surgery was performed on had tuberculosis, and you pull in that air tray, you pull in that card behind you, and the air current is blowing in the hallway, what do you think happens in that hallway?
Everybody gets.
It creates aerosol. If there was some dry because maybe the surgery might have been 2 hours and there were some dry instruments that weren't properly cleaned, those powder-like substances will be microscopic and floating in the air, and you're walking behind that person. If you're pushing a cart, you're inhaling that, right? At the end of the day, you go home and start to cough. That's why we say that, be caused by dry blood spread out into the air by microorganisms that can last on dry surfaces for years or weeks. That's what we mean. That's why your instrument should be completely covered. Any question? Any comments?
So on Saturday, are you guys going online, like with us, to walk in the hospital?
Yes, if get the ID, yes, we go online, we go live. You're going to see everything if we're at a hospital. If some people get the ID between today and tomorrow, because which I don't think is going to happen. But when we do class at the hospital, yes, we walk around with a camera and you see exactly what you're talking about. I have one of the students be the cameraman while we're in decontamination, show you the equipment. That's what we do.
Okay.
All right, guys, this is it. Please read chapters 8 and 9. That's what we're covering Saturday. And is there any question for me before we go tonight? Was this chapter easier to understand now that we're getting into sterile processing? Did it make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
This is the fun part, right? Okay. Now terminology. Okay. Have a good night, everyone. All right, TikTok. That's it. We're done with class now, and this lecture here. If you want to sign up for the class, the link is in my bio. You can click on the link in my bio and RSVP for the class. All right. Like, share, and follow. I have to go. I'm hungry. Bye bye.